Okay, so a quick recap of yesterday. So we have learned about what is an application and what kind of application, what types of applications are there, and what are the major elements that you need to consider while developing an application, and a basic flow, some of the flows we looked into, uh, like sign up flows, the search flow. So these are things we looked at yesterday. So what we are going to do today is we are going to look into the user interface development. So yesterday, when we talked about the front end and back end, right? So the user interface is the front end with whom the user interacts with. So this how to develop this user interface. So with zero code, you don't have to write a code. You can just drag and drop elements and add some properties and some logic to it, and your user interface is developed. But traditionally, the user interfaces were developed with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, combination of these. There are other frameworks that you can use to develop user interfaces like Angular, React, Backbone. These are the advanced frameworks that you can use, but the very basic element tools or elements that you use to develop the user interface are the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So though you are not expected to learn coding these things, but it is important for you to understand this, and that will immensely help you while developing the interfaces within zero code. So there are certain properties that you need to understand. There's a certain way like how user interface is structured is what you need to understand. So that will help you. So I'll take you through number of slides which explain like both HTML and CSS, and then in the evening we'll talk about the JavaScript part. Okay, let's get started. Nina, can you give me the sharing rates? Hello, Veena, is there?
Yeah, sure. Just a minute. Arun, are you not able to share your screen?
No.
Yeah, I've already enabled it. Please check.
Yeah, now I can. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to take a ride and through HTML and CSS. Our destinations are HTML and CSS. So the versions that we are talking about is HTML5 and CSS3. So I'll be your captain for next 1 hour. Let's go. So first, we are going to talk about HTML5. So what is HTML? It is a hypertext markup language. It's a standard markup language which is used to create web pages. So finally, when a web page is displayed in your browser, the code is HTML. So if you know how to write HTML code, you can create your own web pages. So when you take a flight, what happens first? Once you get into a flight and you take your seat, then it's time for you to fasten your seat belts, right? So I'll ask for the same. So be attentive. Uh, we are going to talk about some important aspects which will help you while you go ahead with the further zero code training, especially developing the user interfaces with the zero code. Okay, so let's talk about the basic structure of a structure of HTML. Sorry. So on your right side of the image, you can see structure where it is mentioned like doc type as HTML. And then you have HTML head, body, stuff like that. So what is doc type? So doc type tells the browser how to render that particular page. If this page is a HTML or something else. So you can see that the browsers can display the HTML pages. It can display videos, images, PDFs, and many more. So we need to tell the browser like, okay, this is a HTML page, and whatever the tags inside, you understand it in respect of HTML and display accordingly. So that's all about the doc type. Okay, and in the HTML, so you open a tag, you put some information inside, and then you close the tag. So you open with HTML tag, and then you close the document with the HTML tag. You do slash HTML, so that is the closing tag. In between that, you have various elements. The two major elements here is like the head section and the body section. Head stores the information like what is the metadata. Metadata is the information, the supporting information that you provide for the document, which users don't see, but that helps the browser to understand certain things, and that also helps the other scripts or programs to understand certain things. So you store that information in your head, and whatever that you write within the body is what user looks into. Okay, let's look at the basic structure of the HTML document. So inside your body tag, these are the various elements that you place. On top, you will be having header. Generally, header holds the navigation part, the top navigation part, and probably a logo and uh, some information about who the user who logged in, stuff like that. And then right at the bottom, we'll be having a footer. So this footer might hold some links or some information like copyright information, or it can also hold some interactive elements as well. And it is not necessary for every HTML document to have the headers and footers, but it is a basic standard. And then there is a left side of it, left side of the document, you might be having some menus, navigational menus, through which you access various links in HTML, or if you take an application, various modules or various segments of the application. So that is going to be your main navigation. This navigation, you can have it on the left side or the right side or on top, whatever as per your design. But again, this is a basic structure. And on the right side of it, we'll be having some supporting information or some information when you interact with the elements on the center and click on it, some additional information you might show on the right side. The center section is where you will be having your actual content. So you divide the content into multiple sections, and each section will have its own header, its own footer, and the main content within this header and footer. So this is a generic structure of a HTML document. We are talking about HTML5 version. So that is the latest version. The same thing, look at the HTML4. So you have HTML tag open. Then you have a head element. Within that head, you are giving the title for this particular page. And then within the body, so you place some information in header, navigation on left side, a section in the center, which has header. Article tag is where you place the actual content, and the footer, and a head and footer. So this is a code representation of this particular thing. Okay, so you don't have to be expert and figure out everything today. This is just for your reference. At the end of it, I'll give you a link where you can experiment and understand these things in a better way. So let's look at what are the various types of content that we can place in a HTML document. You can place text. The text can be placed as headers, but whenever you have to place titles, various titles in various sizes, so you use the header tags, which are like H1, H2, H3, H4 up to H6. And if the content is a running text, you might want it to put in a paragraph, like how you write in your notebooks. There is a title, and then there's paragraphs of text you write. Then you can place images. You use img, which is image tag, and the src attribute is where you mention like where this image, from where you want to get this image and display it. And then you can place video, audio content. You can place graphs and charts, maps, and there are widgets, what we call widgets, where there are multiple HTML elements wrapped together with some interaction. So these are all the various types of content that you can place in your HTML document. Okay. Let's look at how the text is placed. Okay. On the right side, you can see the visual representation. On the left side, you can see the code. So if you put an H1 tag, there is a big heading. Like that, up to H6, you can have different headings or titles with different sizes. And then within paragraph tag, you have your content placed. Inside that, you can make the content bold. Bold and strong is almost same. Bold is till deprecate. No, you can use strong. Same with italic and emphasis. So that makes the word emphasized. And you can have a smaller text within that with the small tag. You can mark the text that will highlight the text. Right side, you can see that there is a yellow background to this word called mark. So if you use mark tag, it will highlight the particular word. If you use del tag, you can see that this is striked off this particular word. And you can use INS, which is insert tag, which displays this with an underline. You have subscript and superscript, which displays like either above the text or below the text. And you have an anchor tag. You can use this to link some other web pages or some other content. If you click on this, it will take you to the other section of the same page or other page. Then you have a tag called block quote. Whatever the if you want to present your text as some sort of a quotation, then you can use a block quote tag. Okay, so I'm moving a little quicker here because I don't uh, I don't think you'll understand everything today itself. But this is just to introduce you to these concepts, and as you go through and work with zero code, you encounter all these elements and then you understand in a better way. Okay, so we looked at text and various tags related to text. Now let's look at creating tables. Tables is where there are rows and columns of data that you display. Now, so you a set of uh, records that you want to display in a web page. For example, yesterday we looked at the Gmail, and you have the list of emails that are displayed in a page. So like that, there if you want to display a list of data, so one of the way to display that is using the HTML table. So to display the HTML table, you use the table tag, and to give a title to the table, you use the caption tag. So this caption tag can be used to display the title. Then you have various rows of information. So TR is a table row. So the first row is generally the headings of the particular columns. So TH tag is table heading. So this particular tag you use to display these headings for specific columns or rows. So, and if your column is bigger, then you mentioned as call span. So you can see here for this telephone, there are two columns below. So these are two phone numbers only. So you want to have only one heading for that. In that scenario, you give call span as 2 for telephone header, and then that will be extended up to 2 columns. And all the other column informations than heading, you use TD, table data. So you use this tag and display the information. You can add borders, you can add spacing around, spacing between the columns. So everything that you can mention with various tags. And like call span, you have row span, which extends the row to the number of rows mentioned here. So in this case, row span is 2. That means this one row occupies 2 rows of space. And let's look at how you display a form and what are the various form elements that you have. On the right side, you can see this is a form where a user enters his personal details. So there is a text input box where he enters his name, and then there are radio buttons. Whenever you have a set of values and you have to select one among them, you use radio buttons. When there is a multiple selection within the given values, you use checkboxes. So these are checkboxes, these are radio buttons. When there is a group of radio buttons, you can only select one. When you use checkboxes, you can select multiple answers or multiple options. So there's a date of birth that they have to enter. For this, you can use something like a date tag. You can use input and type, mention type as date. That will, when you click on this particular element, it will display a calendar from which you can select the date. Same with the time. And there's a slider. You can slide, and when you move slide, a different value can be selected. And you can select, add a color element where you click on it, it will open a color palette from which you can select color. And you can have a search element where probably you can even add auto search, stuff like that. And there are select boxes, drop down boxes. When you click on it, it will display a drop down from which you can select. And there is a description kind of a information that you want to put in. You add a text area box where number of lines of text can be added. There's a button that you can add. If you click on it, it will open up your file explorer from which you can select documents and attach those documents to this form. Right, you can have email and phone number fields as well. So if you add input type as an email, it will take entries in your standard email format. And likewise, if you have a phone number field, it will take the entry as numbers and that to a 10-number phone number format. And then you have a field where you can increment or decrement values. And you have password field where your actual entry is masked. So, and then you have buttons. So these are some of the elements in a form. And on the left side, you can see the HTML code to generate this form. So if your form has multiple sections of information, then you use something called field set. So you open with a form tag, you provide a name, and you provide an action like whenever the form is submitted, where to go. And then if there are multiple sections, you use something called a field set tag. So here, personal details is one section. So the field set tag is used, and for title of that field set, you use legend tag, which is personal details. Inside that, you can see there are number of input tags. So when input type is text, you get a plain text field. When input type is radio, you get these radio buttons. And when your input type is date, you get date field. When your input type is date time, you get a time field. When your input type is range, you get this slider. For range, you mention the minimum value, maximum value, and you can also mention the steps. Also. When your input type is checkbox, you get checkboxes. And when your input type is color, you get this color field. Like that, you can have input type as search, a time, and then you have this select boxes where within select you have multiple options which displays the various options when you click on this particular drop down. So these are various input tags that you can refer it back. I'll provide you a link through which you can refer all these input elements and other form elements as well. And then there is a type called list. So when you want to display a list of items in your HTML document, the list can be ordered, unordered. So when you say unordered, it will display these small circles, or there are other kind of representations as well. When that is ordered, it is either 1, 2, 3 or Roman numbers, numerals, or some numeric numbers. Okay, so there is another list which we call as definition list. So we'll have a particular heading and then some text for this heading for these kind of lists. Left side you can see how to create these lists. So if you say UL, it is an ordered list, and then inside that you can mention LIs, which are like list items. So various list items you can mention. OL is ordered list. Again, inside that you can mention various list items. And DL definition is, so you have the heading as DT and the content as DD. So this is how you design lists in a web page. And these elements, there are multiple other elements as well. So I don't want you to go through all these elements right now in this session, because it will take a lot of time and create a lot of confusion to you. You just need to understand that, okay, there are forms, there are tables, there are lists, and you can use certain tags to create those elements. So the number of elements are classified into two groups. Either they are inline elements or they are a block level elements. A block level element occupies the entire space, the entire row within the HTML document. Whereas inline elements can be placed side by side. So you can see here, these are span is one of the tag that you can use to display a text. So there are 3 span elements placed. If you place these span tags one after other, you can see these elements side by side. Whereas if you use div tag, which is a block level element, will come one below other. Okay, so the entire div occupies this row. Next div comes below this particular div. So that is the difference between an inline element and a block level element. You can see a list of inline elements here: the anchor tag, the bold tag, the buttons, the code. All these are various elements that are inline, whereas all these elements are the block level elements. Whether that's your div, whether that's your form, whether that's your header, footer, sections, all these are your block level elements. So you can refer to the following links for better understanding of HTML. I would highly recommend you to look at W3 Schools. So let me open that up. So this is w3schools.com, and this is the place for beginners to better learn and understand various languages. But for us, it's HTML, and whatever that we are going to talk about, the CSS and JavaScript, also you can refer the same. So open this, just scroll down, you can see learn HTML here. Click on learn HTML. Then on the left side, you can see various HTML elements. Okay. So you click on each of the, let's say I clicked on a link called HTML elements. So it displays some of the elements and how you can add those elements with the proper information. And then there is an example provided for each, and you can see write yourself button here. Okay. Wherever you find this write yourself button, just click on it. It will open up an editor. Okay. So on the left side, you're going to add HTML. You click on run. On the right side, you can see the result. Okay. So this is very helpful as to test our knowledge then and there itself. Okay. So at the end of the day, your assignment for today will be to go through W3 schools, click on this write yourself buttons for various sections, write out, take a snapshot and post it. You don't have to post it for every link here, randomly few links, just to make sure that we understand you went through it and you worked with it. Okay, so you can see all the HTML elements here. For example, tables. Okay. You can see an example of a table and how to define a table. You can also look at a video there. You can see all the elements of a table. Table, rows, columns, headers, everything. And just go through it and definitely go with this try yourself button and open up interface and try it out yourself. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. No. So where you can actually input your HTML code, so which applications you can use. You have a standard, if you are using a Windows OS, then you have Notepad application in which you can enter the HTML code and save it as like file name dot HTML extension. That will create a HTML document. If you click on that HTML document, it will open up in your browser and it shows the results. There is another thing called Notepad++. So I recommend you use this, which will actually properly highlight and format the HTML tags. And you have other things like Sublime Editor, Adobe Streamweaver, and there are a lot of editors that you can use. Some are free and some are paid versions. There are online editors as well. That's like within the browser itself, you can open those editors. You can type in the code and you can see the results then at the itself. You saw the W3 schools. Like that, there are JSS, Fiddle, CodePen, and HTML5-editor.net are some of the links where you can directly enter the HTML code within the browser. Okay, so the basics of HTML is done. Now let's continue our journey towards CSS. The CSS3 version is what we are talking about. So what is this? What is CSS? CSS is called as cascading style sheets. So these cascading style sheets hold the styling information for your HTML elements. like how these HTML elements should be displayed. For example, there is a heading. So what size that heading should be displayed, what color that heading should hold, and how much space above and below the heading should have. All this kind of information that you supply with your style definitions. All the style definitions are present in a cascading style sheet file, the CSS file. The CSS can be added to HTML in three ways. One way is you add that within the element itself. Let's say H1 element is there. You mention style as an attribute. Style is equal to, and within the quotes, you can mention various styling properties. In this example, it is mentioned as color as blue. Thus, that will produce a blue heading. The other way that you can add is within your head tag in the HTML, you add a style tag, and inside the style tag, you mention various styles. For example, here for body element, the style is mentioned as background color as white. For H1 element, color as blue, and for paragraph element, color as red. And there is the another way, and probably the most popular way of adding your style information is link an external CSS file to your HTML document. That also you add inside the head element with this particular tag, link tag. In this link tag, you mention this link as style sheet, and this is where you can find the style sheet. So these are the three ways in which you can add the style CSS to your HTML document. So in the CSS, you access certain elements and define the styling attributes for those elements. How you can access those elements? There are various selectors that we'll use to access those elements. The first is called element selector. That is, whatever your HTML element is, we'll use that as a selector and we'll mention various styling attributes. In this case, paragraph is represented by P tag in your HTML. So we mention it as P. And then you have various styling attributes for a paragraph tag. So there is text alignment that you can mention, there is color and you can mention, and there is whole lot of other attributes as well. Again, you can refer to the W3 schools. In that learn CSS part, you select a paragraph and you can see all the attributes that you can add to a paragraph. So we mentioned it as like text alignment center and color red. So that's how it is displayed. A red color text with central align. Then we have something called class selector. When you use, say, in above example, when you use element selector, all the paragraphs in your HTML document will be displayed like this. When you want only few particular paragraphs to be displayed with this style and other paragraphs with the default style, then you use something called as class within your paragraph tag in HTML. So if you can see, P class is mentioned as center. Here in CSS, you mention it as for classes, you mention dot center. That means all the elements which have class center will be accessed and their styling attributes will be displayed like what we have defined here. Like class, you can also use ID. ID can be used for once. ID is generally they should be unique. That means if you use an ID for one particular element, or you use it once, you cannot use the same ID for other elements. Whereas class, you can use it multiple times for various elements. For ID, to access ID, you mention hash that particular ID name and give your style definitions. You can also group various elements together and define styles. So these are just selectors. There are other selectors as well, which we don't have to go through right now. Then something that you need to understand very well is something called a box model in HTML. For each element, you can add spaces within that element, around that element, and you can also give a border to that element. So how these are ordered in, so where you have this particular box, you can see a green box, right? So the green color is a border, and in that box there is a space around the content that is called padding. So inside the box, whatever the space around the element that you want to provide, that will be given as padding. And outside this box, if you want to provide space around that box, that is called margin. So when there are two elements side by side, you want to have some space between the elements. In that case, you provide margins. Within the box, when you add some text, okay, you want to have some breather space between the border and the actual content of it. That's where you provide padding. So here you can see there is a space around this text, which is padding. This is your border, and space around it is your margin. Okay, so how these padding and margin values are defined, or border is defined, that you can define in your styling definitions. You say padding is 50 pixels and margin is 20 pixels. That is, so on every side there's 50 pixels gap is around the content, and even between two elements also there is 20 pixel gap around. You can also mention it as individual values, not the same values on all sides. You can mention like padding top is something different, padding bottom is something different, right and left is something different. Same with the margins. Then let's look at colors. So colors, let's go to our W3 schools. CSS, and let's search colors. So how you can mention the colors is with a hexadecimal code like this, or you can mention it as a RGB value or some standard color values like black, white, blue, green, red. You can mention directly the value, or this, so color values. So these are all the ways with which you can mention color values. Hexadecimal color code, so RGB, RGBA, so 8, and you can mention the transparency of the color as well. There's HSL, HSLA colors, like that. There are a lot of ways in which you can mention the color codes. Okay. Let's look at something called CSS grid layout. Look, there is a small glitch to be there. I'm stopping sharing for a second. I'll be coming back in a second. Let's talk about now. Let's talk about the basic layouting that you can do with something called CSS grid. Previously, you saw HTML table where you can create number of rows and columns to display tabular data. The same tag was used to even define the layout of a page. Now everything will be defined or is defined with CSS. So let's look at the CSS grid, how you can define a layout with CSS. So say this is your typical layout where you have a header, you have a menu on the left side, you have main section here, you have a right side section, and you have footer. So this grid layout, you can define something like a div tag, take a div tag and give a class like grid container, and inside that various grid items you add. So these all the div elements are displayed in this order, side by side, 3 on one side. Okay. In the CSS, you mentioned this particular grid container. You gave a class as grid container, right? That grid container to display as grid or inline grid. And you have various columns and rows within the grid. And here there are gaps between columns and there are gaps between rows that you can mention with these CSS attributes: column gap, row gap, or general gap. Okay. So you can click on this, try it yourself, and just try changing these properties. Let's say here gap is 50 pixels. Let me make it as 70 pixels. See what happens. The gap increased. You can try these things. So that is your CSS grid layout. And one more thing, that most important thing is like your HTML page. Now it has to be displayed in various resolutions. Say you have your desktop, a bigger desktop, you have your small mobile, and that too in mobile there's a portrait mode, there is a landscape mode, you have a tab, you have a laptop. So various screen sizes it has to be displayed properly. And for that, we call it as responsive web designing, where the layout adjusts itself to the dimensions of the screen. How we do it? We set a viewport in our meta tag in head tag. So this viewport gives the basic idea of like how to adjust its content. So whether it has to adjust by its width or something else, and how much it has to scale up the content or scale down the content. And then in your CSS, you mention various breakpoints. Okay. So when you are styling an element, let's say there is one div element which will be displayed side by various divs are displayed side by side. Previous example, you looked at CSS grid, right? There are 3 columns in a row. So in your desktop, it will be displayed as 3 columns in row. But when you are looking the same thing in your mobile device, there's not enough space to display the 3 columns. In that case, you display only 1 column per row. So there are different styling definitions for different screen sizes. So how you mention that? You mention a breakpoint. Let's say if maximum width is 600 pixels, you apply these styles. If it is more than 600 pixels, you do this. If it is more than let's say 800 pixels and up to 1020 pixels, you display it like this. Like that, you can mention various breakpoints and different styling definitions for each breakpoint. So that is, and you can also mention the orientation, whether that's your portrait or landscape. So these are the basic things that you need to understand about CSS. Now, I know there will be a lot of questions, and even if right now you don't have, you will be having a lot of questions while you are actually looking at the content and trying out those things. So what I advise you is like, it's hard to answer all these questions in session. So whatever the questions are, you reach out us with our email, or you can call our coordinator, post your questions, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can through emails. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we have reached our destination for the morning session. Let's meet in the evening session and we'll discuss about JavaScript and something called as a jQuery and Bootstrap. Hope you had a great time. I know there's a little overwhelming, but I made it as simple as possible. I request you to go to W3 schools, look at all the HTML and CSS elements there as much as possible. Click on the Straighten Yourself button, try it out, take some screenshots and post it. So this is going to be your assignment for today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Arun. So hope everyone is clear with the assignment.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. There is another announcement. Please check the chat box. Here we have sent a URL. Jagadish has sent a URL. Okay. All of you need to register that, and the validation code is 0 code April. Okay. Please enter your email ID. This is the actual login for working on zero code application. Okay. Has everyone seen that in the chat?
Madam, you're asking ID, madam.
It's, yeah, you have to enter your email ID.
Registration number, madam. Registration number.
See, there is a validation code called 0 code April.
Yes, ma'am.
You enter that.
Okay, madam. Registration number of the same, madam.
Just a moment. No, you did not enter the registration number.
But it's showing compulsory, madam. There is a red mark.
No, but you just try it.
Ma'am, can you please send me that again? That you will send me again.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
We will also mail it to you in case someone has missed it out.
Yeah, can you check back with Jagdish on the registration number?
Yeah, sure. I think they would have nullified it, but anyways, I'll check.
registration number.
Okay, if that is it, show it's mandatory for everyone.
Hello.
Okay,
Hi,
fine.
Meena.
Yeah,
Hello?
Jagadish, is registration number mandatory?
No. They need to enter their email address and they need to click on the fetch button.
Okay, they will get a number.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone, Enter your email ID and click on the fetch button. You will receive a registration number.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you
Ma'am.
need to enter that number.
Okay,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
Yes.
if you have already submitted request, we will receive the mail soon and వచ్చింది ma'am. Hello.
Which means that you already submitted it. You will receive the mail with the client details.
Okay, unable to save అని వచ్చింది. Hello. Sure. Ma'am.
1 minute.
Yes. Yeah, just a moment.
Okay.
Jyoti submitted it. Bhavani submitted it. Srivalli submitted. Am I correct?
Sir, verification.
Yes.
Verification code means what, sir?
Zero code
It's zero
April.
code April.
That has
Yeah.
been given in the chat, all caps.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody has to do this. Without this, tomorrow you guys cannot understand anything about your class.
Ma'am, unable to save అని వస్తుంది ma'am.
Jagadish, can you, what is your name?
Nagapavan Gudwad. Gudwad Nagapavan.
So did you enter your email address?
I entered, and if you have already submitted request, you will receive a mail soon. If not received, please contact administrator.
What is your mail? Can you please text in the chat?
Okay, sir.
Everybody try it right now.
Yes, more, ma'am.
Muhammad, can you please provide your email address?
Ma'am, I submitted.
Okay, whoever is submitted, you can just mute yourself. Whoever is facing a problem, do let me know, but all the participants definitely have to do this. This is the actual login.
Sir,
You're going
I
to
send
work.
the mail in chat box.
Yes, yes, got it. 1 minute.
Ma'am, it's showing that we have received your request for client, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah.
you
It's
will
done.
get it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm leaving now.
Yes, Arun, thank you so much.
Meet in the evening again.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Ma'am,
guys,
what is the
bye.
registration number, ma'am?
Ma'am,
You click on the fetch button, you will get your registration number.
Okay, ma'am.
ma'am, in mail, I haven't received yet. Means after submitting.
Yes, you will get it later.
Okay.
You'll all receive it by
Yeah.
2-3 hours by
I submitted, ma'am.
Ma'am, what is verification code?
Zero code April, all caps.
Okay, okay.
It's
Sorry,
there.
sorry. Okay, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Others,
can you
please
send
go on
me the
mute. Yeah, tell me.
ma'am, can you please send me the link again?
Okay.
I mean,
Shall I put it on the chat box?
yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, yeah, hello, ma'am. Ma'am, qualification is not responding, ma'am.
It's not
Automatically
mandatory,
or-
right? Is
Yeah,
qualification mandatory there? No.
Okay.
Nothing is
Thank you.
mandatory. Just you need to fill your email address.
Ma'am, registration number.
Fetch. You click on the fetch button, you will receive the registration number.
Yeah, okay.
Submitted, ma'am.
Okay. All of you will receive your client logins before EOD today. Okay. So just have patience. But before tomorrow morning, if you don't get it, please give a call to us or write to us.
Yeah, done, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So whoever has done, you can leave the meeting, and whoever is facing an issue, you can stay and get it resolved right now.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am, please can you provide a recording of these sessions?
Yes, we will provide the recording.
Okay, ma'am. That's all. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.